watching us on Twitter, jump into the YouTube and make some comments, ask some questions, join our contest. Of course, the contest will be in the podcast descriptions as well. Meg, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Sia. I have to shout out all my best ball folks because we're in the home stretch. As you know, I did best ball content on CBS and fantasy football, Sportsline all summer long. And this is the home stretch. And bye weeks are crazy this week, week 14, and then playoffs weeks 15 through 17. So we're in the best ball sweat time. So to all you best ball people out there, I'm with you. Good luck.
I love that. And I think people that don't already know, make sure you're checking out Meg Shoup's content on CBS, CBS Sports and Sportsline, because it's great stuff. She's been doing it all year. Mike McClure, how you doing today?
I am great, Sia. Ready for another week in the NFL, starting Thursday Night Football tonight. Obviously doing this show, talking through all these games later over on CBS Sports Network. So a lot of football all the time. It's what we live for.
That's awesome. We're looking for your top three at each position. We'll cover that at the end of the show. We'll do our cheat sheet at the end of the show. But for the here and now, we got to do our game by game preview. But before that, I know what you've all been waiting for. You've all been waiting for our Hellman Stack segment. Let's get into our Hellman Stack segment right now, where we select the QB and receiver duos to keep an eye on this upcoming weekend. Brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Mayo team reach higher, and your buffalo chicken dip be fire. All right, Mike, I'm going to start with you. What's your stack of the week?
Well, we're talking Mayo, aren't we? I'm going to pick on Gerard Mayo a little bit. I like a little Dolphins stack this week. Give me Tua, but with Devon Achane. We just watched the Lions put up a bunch of points in general. I think that could be the Dolphins this week at home against the Patriots here. So I like Tua in the passing game. We know Devon Achane's involved in the passing game, but also in the running game. And if you give me Achane and Tua, I'm essentially trying to capture exposure to almost every offensive score from the Miami Dolphins here. I like them to put up points. The stack is cheap enough. Tua's just 5,800 this week.
Wow.
I like this one a lot. So we're going to pick on Mayo for the Mayo stack here. Give me Tua, Devon Achane.
Oh, love the brand awareness there. All right, Meg Shoup, who's your Hellman stack?
I'm going to Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans coming off the bye. We've got Mike Evans back in our lives. Will he make it to 1,000 yards? I don't know, but I like them together against the Giants. They actually have a very easy schedule the rest of the way. They could be a sneaky play to, I don't know, sneak in the NFC South, sneak in a wild card. Their schedule is super easy outside of maybe one game. So look for them to go on a run here, starting here. And Baker is QB4 in points per game on the season. So I'm just going to lean into that. And he's got his guy back.
He's got his guy back. All right. I've got Bo Nix. I'm going right back to him. I mean, I had him a little bit last week. I certainly was on Brock Purdy more than I was him. But I'm going Bo Nix to Cortland Sutton against this Raiders defense that, frankly, the Raiders defense, decent against wide receiver ones, but that back end is kind of banged up. And actually, this game has a lot of intrigue for me because there's a lot of guys banged up for the Raiders that could offer some DFS value. Nonetheless, we'll talk about that later. Give me Bo Nix with his running ability and with his arm, and give me Cortland Sutton, the wide receiver, the clear wide receiver one for the Denver Broncos. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Hellman Stack segment brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Just like these QB and wide receiver duos, tailgate snacking and Hellman's Mayonnaise make the perfect combo, bringing out the rich and creamy taste to all your game day dishes. So give it a try and may your game day be delicious with Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Shop at local Walmart stores, Kroger, or groceries, or any grocery store, and add some extra deliciousness to your game day dishes this football season. All right. If you had the Lions last week and you just stacked up the Lions really any way you wanted to, you rolled. And Jeff Stenberg, who might be in our chat right now, might be in our chat later, he won our FFT DFS contest because he played 4 Lions. And, you know, I totally get it. They had the highest implied total last week. They have the highest implied total this week. So, Mike, I'm going to start with you as I see that Jason Hellman is in the chat. He's back. That's fantastic. I'm going to start with you. I mean, is the cheat code? I mean, you mentioned the Lions last week and maybe the Dolphins being this week's version of the Lions. It makes sense to just go right back to this game, but I think there's appetizing choices on the other side as well.
Yeah, I'm actually more interested in the Colts side than the Lions side. I know we just witnessed the Lions put up a ton of points, and essentially everyone in uniform on the Lions got there last week. And I don't think that's going to happen again. I think that they could very well lead the slate in scoring again, but I don't know that everyone's going to get there. Anthony Richardson's the guy we got to talk about, though. I mean, obviously, you've got the rushing upside. You've got the rushing upside in the red zone. And we're talking about a dome game against a script where they're almost definitely trailing. I think that's good news here. So I like Anthony Richardson. Again, it's hard not to at 5,600 with the upside that he presents. I like Michael Pittman at 5,300. I do like Sam Laporta a little bit. And the reason I like Sam Laporta a little bit is he's back. Everything should be good. Check out the price tag on Sam Laporta, 4,300. He's basically priced like a super, super cheap tight end. I know the volume is definitely not where some of us fantasy players maybe would have wanted it to be. But can you argue with the price point, though, at 4,300 in this particular matchup? I don't think you can. So I'm going to have a little bit of Sam Laporta here as well.
Meg, I like Anthony Richardson quite a bit. I mean, obviously his floor is pretty low because he's Anthony Richardson, but his ceiling is pretty high. He's 5,600. I'm not 100% sure who to stack him with. I mean, I agree with Michael Pittman. I think Josh Downs, although more expensive, makes a lot of sense as well at 6,200. I could see myself playing him naked, but actually correlating him with like 2 Detroit Lions, maybe an Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe I pick one of the running backs. What are you doing in this game?
Yeah, I like the Anthony Richardson call. I think that makes sense, especially at that price. I think you could play him naked. I actually like him with Josh Downs. The target share Josh Downs is getting and is definitely attractive, and he looked good with Richardson last week. So I have interest there. And on the Detroit side, I have interest in both running backs, likely not in the same lineup. That can work sometimes. But I have interest in either Gibbs or Montgomery mostly. I think Mike makes a great point about Sam Laporta's price, but my main interest is trying to get in one of those Detroit running backs.
Meg, I'm going to ask Mike, I'm going to ask you both this question. Are you all in or out this week on Amon-Ra St. Brown? Meg, starting with you.
I mean, I get the point. He's has such an awesome floor. And last week I talked about, we haven't really seen a ceiling. Well, we saw a ceiling last week. So we know it's always there, but I think I like some other spend up options more. So I don't see me getting there.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, mostly out. It would have to be very specific lineup build and deep into the player pool. For some perspective on it, I have the computer generate 2,000 lineups. He appears in 6% of those.
Wow.
So very, very low probability I would use him.
And by the way, if you're listening to the podcast, you're missing sort of the graphics on the screen here. I failed to mention Lions favored by 7.5 in this one. It might be down to 7 actually in some circles. Colts, it's a 50 to 50.5 point total. All right, let's move on to the Vikings and the Bears. Vikings favored in this one at Soldier Field. Total around 40. Line here, 3.5. Vikings being favored, of course. Meg, I'm going to start with you. Anything, this isn't like a super sexy game, right? But we do have some potential injury news. Somebody brought it up in the chat. DeAndre Swift could potentially be out for this game. I know he's got a lower body injury, but any interest in this game, Meg Shoup?
Well, obviously, I'm double checking Roshan's price right now.
4,600.
Yeah, obviously, if Swift's out, then I have interest in Roshan Johnson. Yeah. But if Swift is playing, then I don't have a ton of interest in this game. There's just too many other places on the slate that I like better. I mean, Justin Jefferson. Kind of like we talk about these studs like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Justin Jefferson, is always in pit play, but I think I'm paying up for other studs more. So I don't have a ton of interest in this game.
Yeah, Mike, this one's interesting because I look at Justin Jefferson. He's 8,100, and he's slated to get literally 81 receiving yards, which leads the slate. His sportsbook line is technically 81.5, and that's just so everybody knows, that's the highest. Then it's Amon-Ra St. Brown at 74.5. This is give or take a yard or two, of course. Nico Collins at 72.5, Puka Nacua in the mid-60s, and it goes down from there. Tyreek Hill, the next one down. Are you interested in Justin Jefferson, and is there anybody you're getting to in this game?
No, look, Justin Jefferson, as Meg said, he is playable in any lineup anytime you want, right? He's an absolute superstar, and he can certainly get there in any matchup. So he's in the player pool. I don't have a lot of interest. Very similar to Amon-Ra, just 3, 4, 5% kind of thing out of massive player pool. The thing that I would call out here is the tight end position. It's TJ Hawkinson. He's only 4,200. I know he's working back from an injury. You talk about that last game wasn't really needed as much. I believe as the game got out of hand a bit, Oliver came in and played a little bit more. I think he's hurt. I need to check on that. So I think that we could finally see Hawkinson unleashed. And if he is unleashed, I'm not saying he's a $7,000 player, but he's probably $5,500 to $5,800 tight end if truly fully 100% unleashed. And yeah, Josh Oliver did suffer the ankle injury. He did not practice Wednesday. We'll monitor it here. Oliver is someone who's, he's had targets. Like he had 3 in that game, but 6 before that, 5 the game before that. With things being a little more thin and conditions playing outdoors, game a little more competitive, I think TJ Hawkinson might be the top play in this game outside of whatever happens with the Bears running back.
And if DeAndre Swift happens to be out, you would play the Roschon Johnson 4,600 card.
Yeah, I would definitely be looking into it more. I haven't admittedly run through those scenarios too much yet, but yeah. If that does emerge, it'll just almost guarantee that you're looking at 3 running back builds.
Yeah, and I think there's news there might be other games too, but off the top of my head here, the Raiders game. We got to see the practice reports in the next 2 days, specifically today on Zamir White and Alexander Mattison, because if not, you could be looking at a pretty large workload for Amir Abdullah, who we know can catch passes too. I believe he's 4,300. We'll get to that game later on. But next game, Titans at the Texans. Titans are favored here are 8-point dogs. This line is actually, the total has come down. It's 42 here on the screen. It's pretty much down to like 41, 40 and a half. So this one coming down, I don't have a lot of interest personally, Meg, but how can I say that when Joe Mixon is on this team? He's slated to get, I'm pretty sure his rushing attempt prop. And by the way, this is a guy that catches passes too. I'm pretty sure his rushing attempt prop, and I looked at this like a half an hour ago, it was like 21 and a half carries or something crazy like that. Even at 20 and a half or 19 and a half, that is a really high number. He's 8K. He gets all the volume. Hard to look away. Titans rush defense isn't terrible by any means. Your thoughts on this game and is Joe Mixon? There's a lot of running backs you can play this week. CMC, Achane, we already talked about, Kyron Williams. But Mixon's got to be one of those guys. Is he one of those guys for you?
Yeah, I think Mixon's got to be one of those guys, the RB1, basically scoring every week, going over 100 yards, I think, in all but one. He's definitely in my player pool. While expensive, I definitely do like Mixon this week. And then on the other side, I'll say I do have Ridley in the player pool. So just because of his, downfield shots, his target share since Hopkins left. So he's in the player pool. And then I'll just throw out, Nico Collins, he had that play called back. He looks to be very low owned. So if you want a contrarian play from this game, who obviously could, another one that's expensive, but could obviously go off and you're getting him at very low ownership, I'll put him out. I don't know that I'll get to him much, but I do want to throw out that it looks like he's coming in at very low ownership. So likely it'll just be Mixon and maybe a sprinkle of Ridley.
Mike, it's a really good point about Nico Collins, because I think we need to start treating him like we treat Justin Jefferson. And I'm not equating their talents, but in terms of the ability to go off, even in a game where, it's not looking ripe from a DFS standpoint, because we saw, what's funny is if you had the Nico Collins over receiving yards prop, you literally hit it on the first play and then it gets called back and you don't hit it at all. I didn't have that, but I know a lot of people did. And that's got to be really frustrating. But if I'm the Titans, I'm not letting Joe Mixon beat me. And I'm leaving my defensive backs out on an island just so that doesn't happen. I could see Nico Collins catching 2 touchdown passes and 110 yards. Is it too speculative to play at 7,600?
Not at all. In my opinion, no. I think he's a significantly better play than Amon-Ra or Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb this week. So I think I have him as the top projected wide receiver. He's definitely in the player pool for me. They're going to continue to try to get him the ball. You only see 4 catches here. Obviously, the 175-yarder with a touchdown removed. And some of those, there were some timing issues with him and CJ Stroud, but I expect that to really eliminate. But he just has such a massive impact on the game. And if I were paying up for a wide receiver, my pecking order there this week would essentially be Nico, Tyreek ahead of Amon-Ra, Justin Jefferson, or CeeDee Lamb.
And is this question assumes, Mike, that Meg is ultimately correct, that Nico just stays sort of lower owned. Is this kind of like your classic double leverage spot where the expectation is everybody's going to be playing, or not everybody, you know what I mean? A lot of people are going to be playing Joe Mixon. And so you fade Joe Mixon, you play Nico Collins, and you just create that double leverage opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely think that is in play. I think the Mixon one is tricky, but I think out of all of them, Mixon, you could definitely replicate that upside with guys like CMC, Devon Achane, things like that. Considering some of the other situations and matchups, if Nico has multiple touchdowns, and I mean, we've seen the sample size from him earlier this season, 150 yards. You may not get someone replicating that in these specific matchups.
All right. And just so we're clear, because I didn't ask you, Mike, the ultimate question, is Joe Mixon in your player pool? I assume he is to some degree.
In the player pool right now, but certainly not going to be top 3 for me. Let's see, an ownership or an exposure, he would be about 6th, 7th.
Interesting. Well, we'll get Mike's top 3 at each position at the end of the show, along with Meg and I's cheat sheet. If you happen to be watching us on Twitter, that's great. Stay there if you want. But if you want to jump into the chat, you just come to the Fantasy Football Today YouTube page, jump in the chat, ask us a question or make a comment, whatever it is. We got a lot of games to cover, including, Meg, our Commanders. We're going to do it right after this message from our partners.
Yeah, wait a minute, get it how you live it. 10 toes in when we standing on business.
The major prize at stake. The NWSL Championship, Saturday in primetime on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We're back on Fantasy Football Today. DFS, Meg, I'm going to start with you like I always do when we're talking Commanders. This line is 10.5. I believe it opened up at 10, now 10.5. Cowboys have all kinds of issues. Even, we knew they had issues before the last game against the Texans, but they've got some O-line issues as well. I mean, it's just not a good setup for them, but it's still a 45.5 point total. And the implied total for the Commanders is 28. That's almost as high as the Lions. I mean, this is probably the second highest on the slate here. Does that mean you're interested in any Commanders?
Definitely. Actually, Brian Robinson. Jaden Daniels, of course, you could go there with that rushing upside. I think obviously the rib injury and very tough defensive matchups have kept him muted the last couple of weeks. I'm no doctor. I don't know the status of his rib injury, but clearly he's got a much better defensive matchup this week. So you could certainly go to Daniels. I don't know that I will. I think I'm likely paying down at quarterback, but I'm going to lean heavily then into Brian Robinson and hope what happened to the Texans happens to us. And, Brian Robinson gets at least 2 rushing touchdowns. So I'm going to go heavy on Brian Robinson, not play the Washington passing game as much. And then on the other side, the only one I'm looking at is paying attention to Ferguson's injury. If he is out, then if we get a min price tight end, then I have some interest there. I think Schoonmaker caught several passes last week, ended up with close to, I believe, 10 or more PPR points. So have some interest in in Schoonmaker if Ferguson is ruled out.
Yeah, it's interesting because Brevin Spann-Ford caught some passes too. So that's kind of a wild situation. I mean, Jake Ferguson, I didn't even see how he got concussed. I just, it was like he got a catch and then he was out of the game, and it doesn't look like he's trending towards playing in this game, which is very interesting. Mike, do we like anything in this game? Again, I don't think I'm going to be on any Cowboys, and it's hard for me to get, like, game to game, week to week. It's hard for me to get to Commanders, especially if I don't know Jaden Daniels is 100% healthy. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I love the call out on Brian Robinson. He's definitely going to be one of my top 3 running backs this week. I think it's a heavy workload for him. I think he ultimately has a big day. I know there's always concern with Jaden around the goal line. I don't think Jaden's going to run the football unless it's absolutely necessary. Personally, I think this team knows they're making the playoffs, and I think that's the real focus. So I think Robinson, we've seen it a couple times this season where you get like 1st and goal at the 1, he doesn't get in. You're like, oh man, this sucks. We know it's going to be a Jaden Daniels rushing touchdown. And it's not, because they continue to let him run the football. And I think we see that for sure in this particular spot, just looking forward. So Robinson, by far the easiest piece for me in this one at 5,600. I actually think Robinson will become an even better play if Roschon Johnson becomes the play, because I would much rather play Robinson at 56 versus Roschon at 46. So yeah, very much interested there. Zach Ertz also at 3,800, depending on, again, value tight ends could pop up at any moment, but I do like Zach Ertz here.
It sounds like you're out on all Cowboys in this one.
I'll play CeeDee Lamb if I'm playing a lineup that has Robinson and Ertz together. Okay. If not, then it'll be mostly just Robinson's by far the big piece for me in this one.
All right, Mike, let's move along to your team. 1:00 start, the Chiefs at the Panthers. Chiefs a big favorite here, 11 points. Panthers 42.5 point total here. This one's interesting because Chuba Hubbard's been very good, Mike, but we know Jonathan Brooks is back. His Hubbard's stats or his yardage props are pretty muted in the 50 range or just under 50 range. I don't see myself really getting to anyone in this game, especially when you look at the other side, Mike. I think Isaiah Pacheco is playing in this game, so that kind of mutes Kareem Hunt a little bit here. What are your thoughts? I know you are the KC guys. Are there KC viable guys in DFS this week?
I think that Kareem Hunt is still definitely viable. I don't envision the scenario where Pacheco comes in and is just the lead back again right away. I get that they want to bring him back, but what they really want to bring him back for is the postseason, right? So I could see a scenario where Pacheco's in uniform and only touches the football 2 or 3 times in this game. So I like Kareem Hunt still at the price point as of this point in the week. That'll change potentially based on a lot of that injury news that we have across the league at the position. But as of right now, Kareem Hunt is the guy that I like here. So we'll see what kind of news we get out of Pacheco. But for me, even though he is practicing, it wouldn't shock me if he isn't brought back yet in this game.
And thoughts on, D-Hop, Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy got some action, Mike. Any thoughts on those Kansas City Chiefs pass catchers?
I'm going to stay away this week. I don't mind one of them if you have a strong stance on it. I think there's definitely a scenario where they could go put up a bunch of points, but it still projects as a spot. Get in, get out with a win, try and stay healthy. Definitely not a ton of interest here.
Meg, any thoughts on this one? I do need to point out the implied point total for the Kansas City Chiefs is 27. And even though they only have one loss, this is kind of like a get-right spot against the Carolina Panthers. I suppose a Patrick Mahomes stack, you could kind of have that contrarian stack, and that's potentially in play. But this is a pretty widespread. Are you out on this game?
Yeah, pretty much out on this game. Widespread. I'll shout out my best ball folks one more time. I was so high on Jatavion Sanders. He's getting a little more involved each and every week. And we do know you can target that. The one and only place you could target Kansas City Chiefs defense is the tight end position. So I do like a cheap Jatavion Sanders, hoping that he keeps progressing into that best ball playoff season for me.
All right, let's move along to, we got 2 more 1 o'clock games and then 3 4 o'clock games. Bucks at the Giants. This one's kind of interesting to me. We've got a 41-ish point total. Obviously the Bucks favored here. The line was 3.5. Then Tommy DeVito was declared the quarterback, which is super strange to me. And now this line is ballooned up to 5.5 or 6, depending on where you look. Meg, I'm going to start with you because I know your Hellman Stack segment involved Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. So I already know you like those two. Is there anybody else you like? K. Dotton's 5,500, but we're finding a lot of tight end value and a lot of tight end, sort of top plays that we're going to talk about on this slate. Are you in or out on Otten? Are you adding him to a stack potentially? And is there anybody on the other side that you like?
I'll likely play cheaper tight ends, so I don't know that I'll get to Otten. I think you could double stack with Rachaad White if you wanted to, because he's more involved in the pass game. If you don't play Baker, you could play Bucky Irving, because I think he's getting more of the running game. So I think that's kind of how I'm handling the Bucks. But obviously Baker and Mike Evans are my favorite stack. I will throw out that we've talked about 4K quarterbacks before. And if you want to play our favorite Italian or the Giants' favorite Italian and Tommy DeVito, 4K lets you do a lot of other things. He only had one game over 200 yards last year against Washington, actually, and 3 touchdowns. He had one game, I believe, with a second game with 2 touchdowns. So he had a couple multi-touchdown games. He runs, though. So I'll just throw it out there that I am going to have him in my player pool just to allow me to jam other studs.
Mike, does Tommy DeVito make the player pool for you? Is there, if you're making 5 or 10 lineups, does he make 1 or 2?
Yes, he is in the player pool, getting quite a bit of exposure to him. Mostly it's just all price point, right? At 4K. It lets you do basically whatever you want on this slate. So I'm going to have a little bit of DeVito.
And so I think the key question is, do you need to attach him to somebody? And is that what you're doing?
I don't think you need to. I think you can. I have no clue what the chemistry looks like with Malik Neighbors. I have no idea. He's talented enough. They're probably going to force him the ball. But you definitely don't need to, because if you play him, you're able to essentially go get, first off, I think your first piece in the lineup, if you play him, is probably Christian McCaffrey. And it makes every lineup easy to build with McCaffrey still. So yeah, it's definitely not required to stack it.
I'll say this. I'm definitely playing a couple of DeVito lineups. I'm not stacking him with anybody. I might not even have a run back. I might just play Tommy DeVito and get out. I will say this, though. I think a really interesting contrarian play, and this has nothing to do with Tommy DeVito, is Tyrone Tracy. I just don't think he's getting the ownership he deserves. And by the way, if you don't like Tommy DeVito in terms of like, hey, he's a bad quarterback, I mean, this is a Buccaneers secondary that gives up a ton. So even like a bad quarterback can have a game against the Buccaneers. But I also think Tyrone Tracy is really sneaky with so many other running backs getting action. I could see Tracy, and I noticed his props aren't out yet, which is a little frustrating. I could see him getting a ton of work and having a decent amount of success against the Buccaneers. So I think personally, he should be in the player pool. Meg, real quick, any chance you play Tyrone Tracy? And then Mike, you're getting the same question.
Yeah, I think that you made a great point. He's probably going to come at lower ownership, and he's got a great matchup too. But and just back to the DeVito thing, it just all kind of also lines up, as you said, matchup. It's one of the top matchups against the Buccaneers secondary and targeting them in the passing game and likely game script, right? We think he's going to have to throw and be playing from behind or scrambling around. So matchup and game script match too. But I do have some interest in Tracy.
Mike, Tyrone Tracy, yes or no?
Probably not. Okay. I don't mind it. Like, I think there are definitely paths to it happening. I don't love the price point at 6K. 5K, you could talk me into it for sure.
Fair enough. All right. Let's talk about, Mike, the game that you like, or at least the stack that you like. It's the Miami Dolphins hosting the New England Patriots, 7-point spread, 46-point total. Tua and Devon Achane were the two, was your stack. Give me another way to play this game, and will there be any run backs, Mike McClure?
Probably not going to have any run backs. I'm basically betting on just points out of Miami. I think they can put up 30 in this game. So that's essentially what I'm going to be betting on here. We've seen them really start to score again now that everyone's been healthy. And I think that continues. Like even last week against Vegas, we saw Tua throw the football 36 times, 3 touchdown passes. I think that at 5,800, I think that's closer to a normal game for him in this kind of a matchup. So I like him. I'm playing Achane a ton. Jonnu Smith is someone that I will continue to look at 4,100. He's just got a ton of speed and he gets no attention defensively because of all the weapons that they've got. So I do like this team quite a bit. I'll play a little bit of Tyreek, but mostly Dolphins onslaughts with no bringbacks.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, listen, it's a 27-point implied total. And it's still somewhat concentrated. I know Jonnu Smith is getting into the mix a little bit, but it does feel like it's Jonnu, Tyreek, Achane, and like maybe a little bit of Waddle. And that's kind of it. Like, that's what it feels like from a results standpoint, at least. So kind of, it's like an easier stack than, in my opinion, in terms of different types of onslaughts than you would have with the Detroit Lions, for example. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say just looking at my, my builds, when I look at the Tua lineups, the most common thing I have is Tua, Achane, and Jonnu is mostly what I'm looking at. And if you want to play Tyreek, I like Tyreek. He's obviously expensive. The thing about Tyreek is you're mostly, especially the way they're using him with Achane in the lineup, you're mostly getting the exposure there if you play Tua.
All right. Meg, anything you like in this game? Are you on any of these Dolphins? And is there anybody on the Patriots side, whether it be Ramondre at 5,900, Demario Douglas at 4,500, Kayshon Boutte at 3,500, Hunter Henry at 4K? Any of those guys?
I'm pretty much in line with everything Mike said. Just basically like Tua, Achane, Jonnu, and Hill. The just basically focusing some combo there and not forcing anything on the Patriots side.
Okay, I think we've got that game covered. Miami onslaughts in play. Maybe you want to play that on the early only slate or the main slate. I say that because the next 3 games are going to be the afternoon slate. And when we get back from break, I'm going to tell everybody the lineup that made me $700, and it wasn't even a good lineup. And what I'm trying to stress here is that if you play these limited slates like the afternoon slate or the Thanksgiving slate that's coming up very soon, especially if the contest is small, we'll talk about it in a second, you can really benefit from that. You don't have to join the 10 and 20,000 person contests. We're going to hear all about that lineup in these 3 games right after this message from our partners.
Historic rivals with unforgettable seasons meet in a game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA, December 14th on CBS.
All right, we're back on FFT DFS. And I do want to talk about this lineup we're not going to talk about the lineup. I'm just going to say what the lineup was. And I mentioned that I was going to do this on last show. I specifically said I was going to play the afternoon slate, and it was basically going to be all Seahawks and all Niners and a little bit of Broncos, and let's see what happens. This was a 334-person contest. Admittedly, it was a $100 single entry, a little pricey, but the point is it cashed for 700. It was 6th out of 334. And again, this is not a brag. This is not a good lineup, and it came in 6th out of 334 for 7x my money. Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, looking at snowflakes, folks. Audric Estime, looking at snowflakes, folks. DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton, Juwan Jennings, Dawson Knox, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Broncos defense. We're looking at literally only 3 fire emojis with Juwan Jennings and Jackson Smith and Jigba and the Broncos defense. A few snowflakes and everybody else was pretty flat. That finished 6th for 7x my money in an afternoon only 334 person contest. If that doesn't tell you that maybe your contest should be smaller, maybe your slates, you should switch it up a little bit and play some of the early only as well as the main slate, some of the afternoon only as well as the main slate. Like, I don't know how to illustrate it better than that, because that lineup, in my opinion, did not deserve 7x, and it got it nonetheless. All right, let's go to a 405 start. I like this game a lot. I told you I liked Bo Nix. It's the Broncos given 5.5 points to the Raiders. It's a pretty low total at around 41. Meg, I'll start with you. Again, I like Bo Nix to Cortland Sutton. I think the Raiders have a lot of injuries on the back end, so I think Sutton's going to take advantage of that. On the Raiders side, if Zamir White and Alexander Madison are out, I'll probably play a $4,300 Amir Abdullah in a negative game script, probably going to catch a lot of passes, probably out on Jacoby Myers. I do like Brock Bowers. Your thoughts, Meg?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I had obviously Nix and Sutton as one of my favorite stacks this week as well. So I definitely like that. I'm going to keep an eye on the Amir Abdullah news and information there. And then, of course, yeah, Brock Bowers, obviously just having an insane rookie tight end season, insane amount of target share, receptions, yards, everything. So he's, while I usually pay down for tight end, I definitely think he's in play.
Mike, I think it was 3 weeks ago where you said on this show, Brock Bowers is like the modern day vintage Travis Kelce. And he is every bit of that. He's 6,300. He's going to force me to play some 2 tight end lineups. Really like him as a run back to my stack. It's a little expensive, but just like you said, the last few years with Travis Kelce, he's not really a tight end. He's a receiver. And if you look at his stats, he's one of the quote best air quotes receivers in the league. Your thoughts on Bowers and anybody else in this game?
Yeah, I think that this is another great spot to play Bowers. I mean, until he's at least 7K. I mean, when you look at those stat lines, these are stat lines where we would happily pay 8K for Travis Kelce a year and a half ago, right?
Yep.
So I like this particular spot for Bowers. He's drastically underpriced. Yeah, just not enough I could say about Bowers there. You look at the volume and where he would be, wouldn't even be priced as a top 10 receiver on the slate. And he's definitely going to be a top 10 receiver on the slate in terms of volume.
And Mike, I know you have a pretty narrow player pool. In or out on Bo Nix?
I'm a little out right now, but I don't mind it. Like he's been putting up massive totals. Like he's been, almost, he had 31 last week. He had 29 against Carolina, 23 in this particular matchup earlier this season. So yeah, the price point I think is finally crept up enough. It's obviously at an all-time high at 6,300, but wouldn't shock me at all if he throws for 3 touchdowns and 270 in this game.
All right, I think we probably have that game covered. I was going to say, monitor the news. I do think Amir Abdullah is playable if those top 2 running backs are out, and he'll certainly be in some of my lineups. Certainly not all of them by any means. So let's move on to a game that has a little bit more action. Arizona Cardinals, Seattle Seahawks, 47.5 point total. I think Seattle's still holding on to a 1 point. This line might have flipped, but either way, it's basically a pick 'em. Mike, I'll start with you. Geno Smith is only 5,700. Kyler Murray, 6,200. This does seem like a pretty good situation from a stacking standpoint because you've got 2 high implied totals, both right around 24. You got a close game. Are you stacking this game, Mike?
Yeah, I like this game a lot. Honestly, I think a lot of people are going to like the game a lot, but it's competitive. The stakes really couldn't be higher right now. These are 2 teams that, while they wanted to be playoff teams, it's an absolute dream scenario for both of them when you see the way the Rams and the 49ers in particular have kind of collapsed a bit this season. So I think the stakes are just incredible here. I like both sides. I'm going to play a lot of Kyler Murray this week. And the reason for it is I do like the rushing upside, and I like Kyler when the game matters and when it's like really, really matters here. And I think that this is a great opportunity for him in his career, but it's also kind of the price point. You know, you look, he's cheaper than Bo Nix. He's cheaper than Brock Purdy, cheaper than CJ Stroud, cheaper than Jared Goff. And the rushing upside is certainly there. And we know Seattle is a team that can push offensively. And Seattle, when they get in tight games, they abandon the run so quickly and throw the football a ton, which just creates more plays in a football game in general, which is good news when you got a dual threat quarterback. So I like Kyler Murray a lot. I'll pair him with Trey McBride. That's probably my only stacking partner. I don't mind Marvin Harrison Jr. if you want to go there. I think it's okay. And then I love DK Metcalf.
It does sound like Robert Lamont in the chat likes Marvin Harrison, Meg. And by the way, Moshe Stern in the chat, he jumped in late. Now he's going back to the beginning. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks for hitting the like button if you've already done that. And thanks for supporting the show, subscribing to our podcast on Apple and Spotify. Meg, this one, I feel like you can play so many different ways. I think DK Metcalf and JSN both in the conversation. Obviously, Geno Smith stacks in the conversation. I think Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, and of course, James Conner also in the conversation with Kyler Murray. I can tell you from my own experience this year when playing the main slate and even the afternoon slate, Kyler Murray's made me more money than any other quarterback in the NFL. That's just because his price is never high enough and he does have some ceiling games. Your thoughts on this one? What side do you like better? What players are you playing?
Well, I think you made a good point that there are so many players in play. I think all those players you definitely can take a look at having your player pool. But my favorites personally are the Geno to Metcalf stack, as Mike mentioned. Mike mentioned too that they can abandon the run quick. They can be pass heavy. So that's why I like the Seattle side in the passing game. So I like the Geno Metcalf stack. And of course you could add JSN to that. And then I kind of like Connor as my favorite run back in this game. So those are my, I guess, 3 to 4 favorite. Again, all of those could be in play, but those are my 3 to 4 favorite in this game.
I think James Conner is going to pick up some ownership, but that he's going to get relatively unnoticed compared to some of the guys. Like, listen, people are going to want to jam in CMC, Mixon, Achane. So I think, while James Conner might be kind of 4th, 5th, or 6th there, he's not going to get enough ownership. And so at 6,500, I do think he's a value there. I'm definitely going to be playing a lot of this game. All right, let's get to our last game before our cheat sheets and our top 3 at each position, or at least Mike's top 3 at each position. This one's interesting. Niners need to win. I don't know if they can pull it off. I just think they're too banged up and just a little too off here. Mike, I'll start with you. Green Bay favored by 2.5. It's a 47.5 point total. It's ripe for big fantasy days, big DFS days for a lot of these guys. We already addressed CMC. We know we're trying to play him. What else are you trying to play in this one, if anything?
Just all the CMC, all the Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings he's a different player now at this point when the volume is there. He's always been massively efficient in certain situations, but he has really elevated his play. We've now seen 3 different games this season with at least 11 targets, which is incredible. The first one, he had 49 fantasy points. Second one, 16 without a touchdown and 25 last week. So I think that volume is going to be there because I think Green Bay is going to be able to move the ball. And I think San Francisco's neutral or trailing. And if they're even ahead, I think they keep the foot on the pedal because they cannot afford another fourth quarter loss like they've suffered a couple times this season. So for me, I like Jennings and McCaffrey a ton here.
I've been playing Jennings every week for 3 weeks now. Everybody that listens to this show knows that. And I'm playing him again, 5,600. I mean, it's Mike, maybe you just said this. Like, what would you price him at? Like, knowing what he's done and how he's trending, what should his price be?
I would put him at around 7K right now. Yeah. Like, I would you rather have Juwan Jennings volume or Terry McLaurin right now?
Right.
Terry McLaurin has had 2 targets, 6 targets, 3 targets, 8, 6. He has 1 game of double-digit targets, which was on the road at Arizona, and he managed 18 fantasy points in that game. It's not even close for me. Definitely should be 68 to 7,500.
All right, Meg, what do you like in this game? I assume you're in on CMC and on Juwan, but who else?
Yes, definitely. Obviously, CMC and Juwan Jennings. No need to. You guys covered it perfectly. I think an interesting contrarian play could be Jaden Reed on the other side. He's looking to come in pretty low own. And I think that's where you'd want to probably target the 49ers. And if Packers were playing from a negative game script, I think you could see Jaden Reed more involved. So I'll throw out him as like a contrarian play in this game. But yeah, CMC. And of course, Kittle coming back most likely. I think you can put him in player pool. Like I said, I typically pay down more at tight end, so I don't know they'll get there. So to me, the priorities are CMC, Jennings, and then on the other side, I don't mind getting some Jaden Reed.
Yeah, Jaden Reed's interesting. I don't expect Christian Watson to replicate what he did last week. And Jaden Reed's one of those guys we're still kind of waiting for that kind of ceiling-ish game from him. I mean, maybe he's had it this year. It hasn't been recently. They spread it out, but I think Jaden Reed in this matchup could have one of those spike games. All right. Well, speaking of spike games, let's get to our cheat sheets. Meg, we're going to start with you. Your favorite stack, chalk buy, chalk fade, contrarian, and value play.
Sure. So I already covered stack, Baker Mayfield to Mike Evans. Then we'll go chalk buy. Just talked about him as well. Christian McCaffrey going right back there. Finally, hopefully gets in the end zone once or twice. Chalk fade, we kind of talked about this too. Kenneth Walker, they can get away from that running game rather quickly, and he's looking to come in at high ownership. So I'm going to fade Kenneth Walker. When I don't have Baker and Mike Evans, I'll have some Geno and DK Metcalf. And then contrarian play, just talked about this too. Jaden Reed, I like that in that game coming in at likely low ownership and value. If I'm not playing Geno and I'm not playing Baker, I don't mind playing Tommy DeVito to let me just play whoever I want, McCaffrey and whoever I want.
Absolutely love it. All right. I'm on Nix to Sutton. That's Bo Nix to Cortland Sutton. I will say, I'll probably play that on the main slate, but also the afternoon. Like there's so much that's ripe in the afternoon slate with that Seahawks, the Niners, the Kyler Murray stacks. I actually do think it's a good time if you're going to play a few lineups in the afternoon only slate to play a Bo Nix stack, because there's going to be so many people on, rightfully so, on the Kyler stuff or on Brock Purdy or Geno Smith. So I think that's a good time to be contrarian with that stack, because I do think it can go off. I think the Raiders at home could potentially push the Broncos. Could be wrong about that. Chalk by Devon Achane. I'll mention Juwan Jennings as well. Chalk fade is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's just not going to make my lineups. It sounds like Mike and Meg are on board with that as well. Contrarian play is going to be Tyrone Tracy. Listen, I want to play Tommy DeVito too, but Tyrone Tracy could get 20, 21, 22 carries, a little bit in the passing game, and it wouldn't shock me if he got 100 yards and a touch. Value play, Kayshon Boutte. I didn't really mention him, but I do like him as a potential run back in that Dolphins game. And I'll mention Amir Abdullah pending, and Roshan Johnson pending the injury news for those teams. All right, Mike, top three at each position. We start at the quarterback.
Anthony Richardson for now, just the price point, the volume, the matchup I think is interesting because there's going to be opportunity. Tua, I like Tua a lot. I think he's going to be the overlooked one here in this particular spot. And then in the afternoon slate, Kyler Murray, playing in full slate as well, but definitely in the afternoon slate, I think Kyler Murray has a big game here.
Okay. I do want to point out before you give out your running backs, Jay Metz and some others talking about potential weather. We are in the time of year. We know that tonight we have Thursday night football that's going to be affected by the weather to some degree. We're in the time of year where you do have to check out like Sunday mornings, wind and rain and things of that nature, particularly wind, but rain as well, sleet, snow. So, the good news about that is sometimes when you see it, you have a big player pool, you're trying to narrow it down. That can kind of help you narrow it down, but it's definitely something to monitor. So thanks to the chat for pointing that out. All right. Top three running backs, Mike.
Paying up big time for the top two. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey and Devon Achane. I think they're both going to have heavy workloads, 20 plus touches, a lot of touches in PPR scoring over on DraftKings. And then Brian Robinson. I love this spot for him. I think the Commanders do not want to aggravate the injury that I think Jaden Daniels is still clearly playing through. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunately the nature of that injury is just something that lingers for months, right? Yeah. And you re-aggravate it daily when you play the quarterback position. So I don't think they want to let him get hit. I think Brian Robinson gets all the goal line touches. So McCaffrey, Achane, Brian Robinson.
Top three wide receivers.
Juwan Jennings just flat out mispriced for the opportunity. Must-win game for the 49ers. Michael Pittman, just cheap, too cheap. I like what I've seen so far. I like the Anthony Richardson. While he's not a great quarterback, he's a fantastic athlete. If you're going to throw those passes, I want him to be in a dome where it's controlled, where you remove any potential elements that could impact that. So give me Michael Pittman. And then finally, DK Metcalf. I bring back to Kyler Murray. If you like the Geno side, stack it up with Geno. DK Metcalf, I will make not really that bold of a call, but the call here on DK, 70 plus yards, 2 touchdowns.
Wow. Love that. Tight end, top three.
Jonnu Smith, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. Trey McBride, the stack with Kyler Murray. And I think that I can attack the Seahawks over the middle of the field a little bit. And then Jonnu Smith, just too cheap. And Brock Bowers is not a tight end. He is a wide receiver with a tight end designation.
100% true. All right. Before we get out of here, we do what we always do. Meg, you have to make the call. Mike's going to give us a little showdown advice. The Steelers at the Browns. Steelers laying 3.5 points. It's not an official play, but if you had to take one of those sides, which side would you take?
It's the Steelers for me. I'm actually very bullish on the Steelers this season and tonight as well.
Yeah, that's my official pick on Sportsline, given out on the early edge on Monday as
I
well.
always like
Steelers.
when I align with you guys. Yeah, so that feels good.
Usually works out. Steelers
Yeah.
minus 3.5. We'll see on this one. Mike, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the spread, but more importantly, showdown. I mean, this is going to be kind of one of those mucky games. It feels like a Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, maybe you pick one receiver on the Browns. I'm not sure. How you playing it?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of Najee Harris here. I think he touches the ball 20 plus times here tonight. Play both defenses, even the Browns. The kicker spot's always interesting because it does project as a spot where field goals could be in play. However, the weather conditions could be very, very interesting. Boswell's someone who's had a massive ceiling in terms of kicking, so he probably still goes over owned here. I would prioritize the defenses quite a bit tonight, though.
All right. Defenses, Najee, makes a lot of sense. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a great week 12. I'm going to tweet out our schedule for next week. We're still trying to figure it out with the holidays and the Thanksgiving slate, that 3-game slate plus the main slate on Sunday. So we're going to get back to you on all of that. But thanks for joining us today. Let's have some green screens for week 12. This is Fantasy Football Today, DFS. On behalf of Meg Shoup, Mike McClure, my name is Sia Nejad. We'll see you on the next one.